The paramedic stared at the monitor, a flat pulse line, a cold wrist, silence where life should echo. Yet the patient's chest rose in steady breaths, his lips whispering, "I can move." A nurse pressed harder at the radial artery. Nothing. The room tightened. No pulse meant dead, but his toes twitched as if challenging the verdict. "Squeeze my hand," I said, half expecting failure, half praying for a miracle. His fingers closed around mine with stubborn strength. No Doppler signal, no palpable beat, just a grip that felt deliberate, alive, defiant. A shocking contradiction pulsed through the room, even if his arteries refused to confess it. Someone muttered, horrified, "How is he doing that?" We checked again. Carotid, femoral, pedal, each exam a ritual against the unknown. Every site returned the same impossible answer. Nothing. Yet the patient rolled a shoulder, grimaced at the IV, and lifted his head like a swimmer reaching for air. The monitors blinked readable numbers, but the one we trusted most stayed flat, stubborn, deadly. "Try to sit," I urged, voice steady to mask the quake in my chest. He planted his heels. Muscles fired in clean sequence, as if obeying a hidden metronome. He rose an inch, then two, then paused, eyes burning with a quiet terror that mirrored ours. His skin, pale and cool, looked like winter. His will looked like spring. When he finally stood, the heel strike echoed down the corridor like a gavel, pronouncing a verdict medicine hadn't prepared to hear. No pulse. Walking anyway. We had clues, temperature, pressure, a possible artifact. But none explained this precise choreography of movement without a beat. We thought we knew the limits of life. What happened next would challenge everything medicine thought it knew. His chart read like a paradox. No detectable peripheral pulse, spontaneous movement intact. The angle of the case was as sharp as a scalpel. No pulse recorded, yet the patient could sit, stand, and under watch, take measured steps. We logged every value, every sound, every shiver of muscle, trying to name the unnameable without surrendering to superstition. He was a 42-year-old tech worker, quiet humor, weekend cyclist, father of one. That morning, dizziness hit like a power outage. He collapsed en route to the kitchen, coffee spilling like an exclamation mark on tile. When the EMTs arrived, respirations were present, oxygen okay, EKG intriguing, but his wrists told a different story. In the ambulance, he whispered, "Don't let me stop moving." The ER felt colder than usual, even with the overheads blazing. We warmed his skin, recalibrated cuffs, switched probes, and repeated exams with near-religious patience. The team split, one half chasing hemodynamics, the other mapping neurologic function. He could lift, push, track our fingers, and follow commands. The body was performing. The pulse, our most basic proof of life, was missing in action. A medical curiosity surfaced, adding credibility to the impossible. Rare states can mask peripheral pulses, profound vasoconstriction, severe hypothermia, low-flow shock. Even equipment artifacts can hide a beat from human fingers. There's also the eerie Lazarus phenomenon, auto-resuscitation after apparent death, reminding us that circulation can be a trickster. But a patient walking, that pushed the boundary from rare to breathtaking. We set a simple goal: protect the brain, find the beat, and decode the mechanics behind movement without a palpable pulse. Between labs, imaging, and careful observation, a pattern began to emerge. One that threaded science through mystery without tearing either apart. The day began with silence, broken only by the hiss of oxygen and the shuffle of shoes on hospital linoleum. Our patient lay on the gurney, skin pale but lips tinged with stubborn pink. His wife clutched his hand, whispering his name, begging him to stay. Vital signs flickered on screens, respiratory rate stable, oxygen within range. But when we reached for his wrist, the story collapsed. No radial pulse, nothing. The contradiction froze the room like ice. We switched positions, pressing 2 fingers to the carotid artery, then to the femoral, then back again. mechanical repetition meant to erase doubt. Every test returned the same chilling verdict: absent. "I don't feel anything," the resident said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yet at that exact moment, the man shifted his legs under the sheet, curling his toes, moving deliberately. It was like watching a ghost flex muscle against the rules of life. The EKG monitor, loyal and defiant, displayed electrical activity. A sinus rhythm scrolled across the screen, steady if not entirely strong. The tension between what we saw and what we felt clawed at the edges of reason. How could a heart produce an electrical trace without delivering a palpable beat? Was it artifact? A trick of the machine? Or was something deeper unfolding, something medicine hadn't yet charted? "Sir, can you move your right arm?" I asked, leaning close. He raised it sluggishly but with purpose, as if proving his defiance against the evidence stacked against him. The nurses gasped. This was no reflex. This was command following, cognition intact. His wife sobbed, clutching the bedrail. The contradiction felt almost supernatural, but the rational part of us screamed, "Find the science." We ordered immediate labs and imaging, blood gases, lactate levels, echocardiogram. The IV line pumped fluids, while monitors blinked their truth in neon colors. Still, the pulse eluded us. No radial, no pedal, no femoral. The hands of doctors, trained to recognize the simplest sign of life, found only silence. And yet, the patient rolled onto his side with effort, as if preparing to rise. It horrified and mesmerized us in equal measure. In medicine, first symptoms usually tell the story, but here they only deepened the mystery. He had collapsed at home with dizziness, regained consciousness quickly, and insisted he could walk. The EMTs reported he resisted lying flat, even as they strapped him down. Now in the ER, his muscles answered commands, his eyes followed movement, his voice whispered requests for water. The absence of a pulse mocked our textbooks. The initial working diagnosis teetered between hypovolemic shock, profound vasospasm, and low-output cardiac state. But each had flaws. Hypovolemic patients don't walk. Vasospasm can steal a pulse, but not everywhere. Low-output states weaken movement, not strengthen it. Each option collapsed under the weight of what we witnessed. The resident flipped through her notes, muttering, "None of this makes sense." She was right. The CT scanner hummed, swallowing him whole. Brain imaging, normal perfusion. Echocardiogram, cardiac contraction present, though oddly asynchronous. It was as though his circulation had taken an alternate path, bypassing our fingers, yet nourishing his organs. The phrase pseudo-pulseless state was scribbled in the chart, but no textbook explanation could soothe the goosebumps crawling up our arms. I leaned closer as he whispered again, "Don't let me stop moving." His words carried both urgency and dread, like someone bargaining with forces beyond comprehension. Each step he tried to take was an act of rebellion. Each breath a reminder that life doesn't always follow rules. The first symptoms had betrayed us, the initial diagnosis crumbled, and the story had only just begun. And as the CT doors slid open, delivering him back to us, we realized this was not a routine case, not even a rare one. It was the opening act of something that would either teach us medicine's hidden chapter or terrify us with its silence. The doctors thought they had seen everything. They were wrong. The first night in the ICU began with fragile hope, but it didn't last. Though our patient moved, though he whispered words, his skin cooled with each passing hour. Nurses wrapped him in thermal blankets, heated IV fluids coursed through his veins, yet his temperature hovered dangerously low. The absence of a pulse wasn't just an oddity anymore, it was becoming a threat. A hollow beat echoed through the unit. How long could he walk without circulation we could measure? The monitors betrayed us with contradictions. His oxygen saturation remained fair, respiratory rate stable, but blood pressure readings swung wildly, sometimes barely detectable, sometimes surging as if mocking us. Each number felt unreliable, like shifting sand beneath our feet. "We can't trust the cuffs," one nurse muttered. "But what if the numbers are real?" asked another. The room held its breath, waiting for the truth to show itself in his body. By dawn, his movements grew erratic. He could sit up, but his legs trembled and his grip weakened. Neurologic checks revealed subtle delays in response. It was as if his body balanced on a razor's edge, alive enough to resist collapse, unstable enough to threaten disaster at any moment. We braced for the worst. What terrified us most was the uncertainty. We didn't know which sign mattered and which would betray us next. His wife stood at the foot of the bed, pale and sleepless. "Why can't you feel his pulse?" she asked, her voice breaking. None of us had an answer that didn't sound like an excuse. We explained rare possibilities: profound vasoconstriction, distributive shock, equipment errors. But explanations felt hollow against the reality of her husband's twitching muscles and absent pulse. She covered her mouth with trembling hands, horrified by the silence in his veins. At 3 a.m., alarms shrieked. His oxygen saturation plummeted without warning. The respiratory therapist rushed in, adjusting flow, checking airway. His chest rose, but shallow, strained. ABG results came back acidic, revealing hidden hypoperfusion. The labs told a story the monitors didn't. Tissues starving despite apparent stability. We realized then the body was burning reserves in secret, masking collapse with fragile movement. Each second became a gamble between breath and silence. His kidneys betrayed the first true failure. Urine output dwindled to drops, amber and concentrated. The nephrologist's brow furrowed. If perfusion's this poor, he won't hold much longer. Dialysis was discussed, but even the machines demand circulation. The irony clawed at us. We needed to treat him as if pulseless, yet he still answered commands. Was he alive because of hidden currents or because he refused to surrender? By morning rounds, neurologists gathered. Cardiologists argued. Intensivists whispered hypotheses like prayers. One theory dominated: a profound dissociation between electrical and mechanical heart activity, pseudo-pulseless electrical activity, an enigma where movement and consciousness outpace measurable circulation. But the textbooks offered only death in such cases. He was still here, still whispering, still trying to move. Science and horror blurred. His muscles began to cramp, as if each contraction cost more than it could repay. Tremors shook his arms. Nurses massaged his limbs, fearful the next spasm might be his last motion. His wife begged him to stay still, tears streaming, but he shook his head faintly. "If I stop moving, I stop," he whispered. The words struck like lightning, echoing around the ICU walls. None of us could deny the dread coiling in our chests. Then the second collapse came. He slumped sideways, eyes rolling for a breathless instant. The monitors exploded in alarms, saturation dipping, heart rate slowing, waveform unstable. Staff swarmed him, hands pressing, wires reattached, medications pushed. For a moment, silence overtook the beeping machines, a void thick with fear. When his chest rose again, weak but deliberate, the room erupted in relieved disbelief. The man without a pulse had nearly crossed the line again. And as dawn's first light painted the ICU windows, we knew this story would not resolve with routine medicine. Every complication only sharpened the paradox: a man living, moving, whispering, without the basic sign of life. The worsening was only beginning. The next chapter would force us to question not only physiology, but survival itself. The doctors thought they had reached the edge of the unknown. They hadn't. By the third day, exhaustion weighed on everyone. The patient's body defied the rules, his every movement an enigma. Yet cracks deepened, kidneys faltered, muscles spasmed, speech grew faint. We were running out of explanations and time. The medical team gathered in tense silence, notes scattered across the table. Something didn't add up. "We're missing the thread," one cardiologist whispered. That was when the clue emerged. From a machine often overlooked, a technician reviewing continuous Doppler scans froze mid-sentence. "Look here," she said, pointing at faint waveforms on the screen. They weren't normal arterial pulses. They looked dampened, delayed, faint as whispers. But they were there, not in the wrist, not in the ankle, but deep within the core vessels. Low-flow states, she explained, hidden from touch. A possibility dawned. Blood was moving, but so sluggishly, fingers could never feel it. The theory spread like fire. Extreme peripheral vasoconstriction. His vessels had tightened so drastically they masked the flow everywhere we normally checked. In survival mode, his body had rerouted circulation inward, prioritizing brain and heart at the expense of skin and limbs. This explained the paradox. No pulse at the wrist, yet strength in his legs. He wasn't beating convention. He was obeying a cruel version of biology's last stand. But another discovery added horror. Labs showed escalating lactate and rising potassium, markers of muscle breakdown and metabolic collapse. His body was running a secret marathon, cells starved and crumbling while the core clung to survival. We realized his ability to move wasn't proof of health. It was the last flare of a system burning itself out. The contradiction sharpened. Alive, but unsustainable. Could we reverse it before the final collapse? In a desperate meeting, treatment options were laid bare. Aggressive vasodilators to reopen circulation, mechanical support like ECMO, or experimental therapies rarely attempted. Each choice carried lethal risk. If we force vessels open, one doctor warned, we could flood a fragile heart and brain. Yet leaving him meant waiting for organs to fail one by one. Every option looked like a gamble against fate. His wife asked the only question that mattered. Will he live? Then came the turning point. As we debated, a nurse adjusting electrodes gasped. The monitor briefly showed synchronized muscle activity aligning with faint arterial flow. Movement wasn't random. It was timed with deep, hidden beats the stethoscope barely caught. His body knows something we don't, she whispered. A shocking possibility formed. His muscles themselves might be helping circulation, acting like a second pump in rhythm with the heart. This reframed everything. His insistent demand, "Don't let me stop moving," wasn't superstition, it was instinct. His movement kept sluggish blood coursing, amplifying faint circulation enough to nourish brain and limbs. Stopping could mean immediate collapse. The man had become both patient and machine, keeping himself alive through motion when medicine failed. It was horrifying, miraculous, and undeniable. Armed with this insight, the plan shifted. Instead of restraining him, we encouraged controlled assisted movement. Nurses guided arm lifts, leg presses, slow walks around the bed. Monitors revealed subtle improvements, lactate stabilizing, oxygen delivery improving, consciousness sharpening. Science had found a thread to hold, but it was fragile, fraying at every knot. Each step could break him or save him. The discovery sparked awe and fear in equal measure. Doctors debated whether to publish immediately. "We've never documented this," one said, "but if we're wrong, it's reckless." His wife clung to hope, whispering gratitude each time he moved. The patient himself, weak but aware, whispered again, "Don't stop. Keep going." The ICU transformed into a place where every gesture felt like the hinge between life and death. And yet, just as progress seemed possible, new shadows appeared. Abnormal heart rhythms creeping into the monitor, faint arrhythmias threatening to spiral. The fragile balance could crumble any moment. The turning point had given us knowledge, but it had also shown us how close he was to the edge. The next chapter would demand a decision no one wanted to make. The doctors thought they had discovered salvation. They hadn't, not yet. The arrhythmias grew bolder. What began as faint irregularities soon twisted into runs of ventricular beats, each one threatening collapse. The team gathered in the ICU, voices overlapping, urgency spilling into the air. "If we don't intervene now," warned the attending cardiologist, "he won't last." But which intervention? Conventional algorithms didn't apply to a man alive without a pulse. Every choice felt like stepping onto a frozen lake that could crack beneath us. Options were pinned on the whiteboard. Option 1, vasodilators to reopen vessels, risking catastrophic hypotension. Option 2, mechanical support like ECMO, invasive and dangerous with unstable rhythms. Option 3, experimental synchronized pacing, trying to align heart and muscle contractions. His wife listened, silent but unyielding, until she whispered, "Choose the one that gives him a chance to walk again." Her words cut deeper than any guideline. After heated debate, the decision was made: attempt a hybrid approach. Start low-dose vasodilators under invasive monitoring, then immediately couple with assisted movement therapy to keep circulation active. If collapse followed, ECMO would be prepared as backup. It was daring, borderline reckless, but nothing about this case had been ordinary. The order was given. Nurses readied lines, perfusionists stood by, and silence thickened as the first dose dripped in. At first, nothing. Monitors hummed their usual contradictions, the radial pulse still a void under searching fingers. Then, faintly, the Doppler sang, a shallow waveform, timid but present. A nurse shouted, "I hear something." Hope flickered, but quickly dimmed when blood pressure dipped dangerously. He trembled, face blanching, lips whispering, "Don't stop." Doctors argued mid-crisis. Push more vasodilator or stop immediately. One wrong move could extinguish him. That was when innovation struck. A young resident, eyes wide with desperate clarity, suggested, "Let's time his assisted movements with the faint waveform, make his muscles amplify the beat." It sounded insane, turning exercise into circulation support, but the attending paused, then nodded. "Do it. Now." Nurses lifted his arms in rhythm with the Doppler blip, pressing his legs in counter time. The room became an orchestra, synchronizing flesh and failing heart. And then it happened. For the first time, a weak radial pulse flickered under fingertips. Brief, fragile but undeniable. The ICU erupted in gasps. The wife sobbed with relief, clinging to the bedrail. But the celebration lasted seconds before alarms blared. Arrhythmias spiked, threatening chaos. "Keep the rhythm," the cardiologist shouted. Movement continued, timed with desperate precision. Every second balanced between miracle and catastrophe. Hours passed in this precarious dance. Labs revealed stabilization, lactate dropping, potassium plateauing. His kidneys, once silent, produced faint streams of urine, a sign that perfusion was returning. It was a scientific triumph wrapped in terror. The nurse's arms ached, the resident's voice cracked, calling rhythm cues, but no one dared stop. By evening, a new pattern emerged. His heart and muscles began sinking without external help. Movements grew smoother, less erratic, almost instinctive. Each step he tried sent a faint pulse outward, now strong enough to be captured on the monitor. "He's teaching his own body how to live," whispered the resident. Science called it a mechanical metabolic adaptation. We called it survival beyond reason. Yet one question haunted us. How long could this last? The innovation had bought time, but the arrhythmias lingered, threatening every breath. ECMO remained primed in the corner, a silent reminder of how thin the thread was. His wife, exhausted but resolute, pressed her forehead to his hand. "Whatever it takes," she whispered. The doctors exchanged looks, heavy with dread. Whatever it takes could mean the unthinkable. And so the chapter closed with fragile hope and looming peril. We had discovered a way to keep him alive, marrying movement and medicine in a dance never written in any textbook. But the cost of innovation was high, and the danger higher still. The next hours would decide whether he would step into recovery or collapse into silence forever. The doctors thought the worst was behind them. They were wrong. The dawn after the critical night felt different. The monitors no longer screamed unpredictably. Instead, they hummed with cautious stability. For the first time, a faint but consistent radial pulse was palpable, weak, fragile, but undeniably there. The nurses exchanged weary smiles. His wife wept, pressing her lips against his hand. yet nobody dared call it victory. We had learned that in this case, stability was an illusion that could vanish in a heartbeat. With circulation partially restored, his color improved. Pale gray gave way to faint pink, as if spring was cautiously blooming across frozen ground. He whispered words clearer now, thanking each nurse by name. Physical therapy began cautiously. Assisted standing, slow steps. Each movement still seemed to amplify circulation, but the body no longer demanded constant rhythm. Science was catching up to instinct, slowly filling the gap between survival trick and genuine recovery. Lab results brought hope. Lactate, once dangerously high, dropped into near normal ranges. Kidney function improved, urine flowing steadily. Even the arrhythmias quieted, tamed by a heart regaining control of its rhythm. The medical team documented everything, aware that journals would hunger for details. But beneath the clinical notes, awe lingered. A man who should have been declared dead was alive, walking, proving medicine didn't know its limits. Conversations in the ICU grew philosophical. One resident whispered, "We saw a body without a pulse rise and move." Another replied, "We saw willpower rewrite physiology." His wife believed it was divine intervention. The doctors leaned on science, but even they struggled to explain the full picture. Somewhere between arteries and miracles, he had carved a path back to life, horrifying and inspiring us all. Rehabilitation accelerated. Each day his steps grew steadier, his grip stronger. He laughed faintly at his wife's jokes, though tears often followed. "I felt myself slipping," he confessed one morning. "Every time I moved, it pulled me back." His words confirmed what we suspected. His body had transformed motion into medicine. It was both terrifying and miraculous, a reminder of how fragile and adaptable life can be. Yet scars remained. His muscles bore signs of breakdown, his kidneys needed close monitoring, and his memory of the ordeal was fragmented. He asked us repeatedly, "Did I really have no pulse?" Each time we answered honestly, yes. By every measure, he shouldn't have survived. His eyes widened, then softened, as if he carried a secret that science could not fully claim. His wife simply held him tighter, unwilling to let go again. On discharge day, he walked slowly down the corridor, IV lines removed, hospital gown traded for loose clothes. Staff lined the hallway, applauding softly. Every heel strike echoed with defiance against death. Cameras clicked, documenting the impossible. He raised a trembling hand, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Don't stop moving." Those words, once desperate, now sounded like a creed. Nurses wiped their eyes. Even hardened physicians felt shivers down their spine. For the medical community, his case became both a puzzle and a beacon. Articles would be written, theories debated, mechanisms proposed. But for his family, it was simpler. They had witnessed a miracle cloaked in science. A man without a pulse had walked, fought, and lived. The transformation wasn't only in his body, but in everyone who saw him defy the silence of death. Still, one lingering fear haunted us. What if this was only temporary? Could hidden vulnerabilities strike again? His follow-up plan included endless tests, careful monitoring, and a lifetime of vigilance. Yet when asked if he was afraid, he shook his head. "I've already crossed the line once. I know now what matters." His resilience inspired us more than any textbook could. And so his story closed where it began, with movement. The patient who had no pulse but still walked left us with more questions than answers, more awe than certainty. Medicine had measured his silence, but life had rewritten the script. The doctors thought they had witnessed the end. Instead, they witnessed a beginning. What came next would remind us that every survival carries a lesson still waiting to be understood. In the end, the case of the patient with no detectable pulse, who still managed to walk, became more than a medical anomaly. It became a story of survival that blurred the line between science and miracle. Doctors measured silence in his arteries, yet his muscles and willpower rewrote the rules. What should have been a final chapter turned into the beginning of a new life, filled with gratitude and humility. His recovery reminded us that medicine is not only about machines, labs, or monitors. It is also about listening to the body's whispers, to instincts that sometimes precede knowledge. His words, "Don't stop moving," became a mantra not only for him, but for every professional who witnessed the ordeal. The shock, the horror, and the awe merged into one unforgettable lesson. Life can find paths where logic sees none. 3. But now we turn the question to you. What do you think really saved this patient's life? Science or fate? Write your answer in the comments below. And don't leave just yet, because in our next shocking medical mystery, you'll meet a patient whose laughter nearly became deadly.